All right. Well, good morning. It is good to be with you. Good to be here this morning. What a beautiful day. What a beautiful week we've had. Summer, some of us are a couple weeks into summer. Some of us are just one. And Shiloh, I don't know about you, but where'd it go? It's moving already too fast, and goodness gracious. But this is my time to kind of go. It's supposed to be my time to catch my breath, but we haven't been able to do that yet because so many things on the plate. And this has been a little bit of a crazy weather week. We've had some. Fortunately, we haven't been plagued like they were in Ohio and in the plains with severe storms, but we've had a lot of rain. And kind of popped up and here and there. And you know, most of you know, if you know me very well, you know I'm a weather nut. I like watching the weather. I like looking at things, and I like studying it. And actually, if God hadn't called me to share the gospel, which I think is far more important, I probably would have done something in the line of meteorology because I just love it so much. It's kind of a hobby. But and my kids always remind me that I'm not a weatherman. And some of the things that you figure out is when you think you get it figured out, you get humbled pretty quick. Had an opportunity to go to a ball game Thursday night. We went to see the Hot Rods, and it was a beautiful night. I was just kind of watching the forecast, and I'm not one to be, and it was really nice. I mean, it was just really, really, really beautiful, and the weather was pleasant. And so we come home that night, and my wife was like, "You need to take care of this and this because it could rain." And I said, "No, it's not going to rain. The percentage is really low, and we're good. I mean, it hasn't rained here hardly all week. It was like it poured a flood over here, and then here we barely had a half inch of rain. It's not going to rain tonight." It rained. And so that's how you get humbled when those things happen. And so what you do realize is that there are weather patterns that are predictable, and others are what I consider to be predictably unpredictable. And so there are days that and this is where we come to when we come into summer. When we come into summer, there are days that the percentage or the chance or the risk of storms are much higher than there are other days. And so some days you get one of those thunderstorms that just pop up, and there it is. And other days you don't, and you just kind of have to wait and see what happens. And that is the way it is with life. There are seasons of life, there are times in our lives that things just can naturally happen, and we lend ourselves to that. And we all go through seasons of life. And if you're married and you have children, you really understand what I'm talking about, is because, you know, when you were younger and before you got married and before you had kids, you really didn't think about a lot of common sickness, okay? But when you have kids, they just get sick, and it's just like that. And so when you're kind of used to being, when I was in college, it's like, you know, I never got the flu and never got really sick, and you just kind of roll on through and having, you know, those. But then you get kids, and it's like, okay, we got to go. What's wrong? And then you put the hand on, and it's like, oh gosh, you got a fever. We got to go to the doctor. And all of a sudden it just happens, and so it's just really, it's very well. I say it's predictably unpredictable, but whenever Sandy and I would ever go out of town, when we would have to leave town, one of them always. Okay, Taylor was the worst about it. She would get a fever, and it's like, you know, it's kind of like a puppy that's anticipating you leaving them in a kennel. It's like, no, I'm going to get sick, and so she would just get sick, and so it happened all the time, and so it's just one of those things that you deal with, and here's the thing: there are times in our lives when conditions are more favorable than others for things to just go haywire. Okay, and it's just as we go through seasons of life, as things happen. Those things happen. And here's my question for you this morning, and what we're going to be studying and what we're going to be looking at for the next few weeks anyway, is how do you handle that? How do you handle it when life falls apart? How do you handle it when the predictable or the unpredictable happens? Okay, you know it can happen, but it doesn't, you know, and then sometimes it just does. And when it does, how do you deal with that? And for some of us, it's even worse. You know, things happen that you just get, you know, you get that news and you don't know how to deal with it. And here's the thing: how do you respond under pressure? Because this is what I know about you, and this is what I see. Some people are not, okay? And if you're not, that's fine. I'm not telling you that you should be. But this is what we do when we have storms come into our life now. We let everybody know about it, okay? And that's how I find out about it a lot of times. I read what you post, okay? And I do that. I mean, that's just what I do. I mean, if we're friends and you're a part of my Living Faith Church family, I got you up there in the priority list, okay? I'm watching to see what goes on in your life, and you put it out there. And here's what you need to also need to understand, is that you probably, well, not probably, guarantee, you have non-believing friends, or your friends have non-believing friends that see how you respond to things that come in your life. Tragedy that happens, storms that rise up. And then when it happens, you put it out there. Not everybody does that, okay? I understand that. Some people are very private, and that's okay. And you handle things in different ways. But still, even at that, when people come to the realization and go like, oh, wow, okay, I didn't know this was going on, how you respond to that is a testimony, okay? How you respond to pressure, how you respond to storms in your life, how you respond to tragedy, how you respond to those bumps that come along. Sometimes it's a big storm, sometimes it's just a shower. Okay, and so as we go through those things, as we deal with those things, how we respond to that. And of course, you guys know that I tend to be pretty busy. I juggle a lot of different things. I spin a lot of different plates. I got a lot of different things going on in the areas that I do. And sometimes things get really, really crazy. And spring is that way. One of my favorite times of the year is spring break. Okay, and I love spring break because spring break is usually an opportunity for my family and myself to just kind of step back, unplug, and go somewhere and sit down. But this is what happens when we do that. This is part of that predictably unpredictable. I know that when I come back to school from spring break, that it's going to be crazy. Okay? I know that. I mean, it's just part of the deal. It's part of what I do. We have all of those things. And those of you that are teacher-type people or involved in school or have kids realize what I'm talking about is when you come back from spring break, then you've got testing and you have all these things. And we have FFA and we have the greenhouse and we have all these things going on. And sometimes I'm sitting there on that period of time when it's kind of calm and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, okay, it's going to be crazy. You know, and so you just kind of get yourself kind of in a mindset because you know things are coming. And then what happens, it's one thing to know all the things that are coming. I mean, you got calendars. All you guys have calendars. And you look on the calendar and you're like, how are we going to get from 8th grade graduation to the baccalaureate service with 20 minutes to spare, you know, and eat? Okay, how's this going to happen? You know, and so you're looking at the schedule and you're looking at the ball game schedule and, you know, this one's got practice over here and this one's got a game over there. And you're trying to piece all these things together. And it's like, I know this is going to be crazy. And then something else happens. Someone gets sick. Someone passes away. Something happens. You get sick. A phone call comes. A text comes. And all of a sudden, I wasn't planning on this. Okay? I wasn't expecting this to happen in the midst of all these things. When I first started teaching back in the 90s, in the 1900s, I was a prom sponsor. I kind of inherited that from Mr. Shown. He inherited it from Mr. Bennett, and so that's kind of what we did before we moved prom away from the high school. We decorated the gym. And I did that for 10 years, and I would not want to do that again because I'm afraid it would kill me, but we had a good time with it, and we tried to make it a little bigger, a little better every year. And so people who know me and were some of you all walked that mile with me, and so it was intense, okay? I mean, it was an intense time. There were many all-nighters and things that we did, and you guys, Robbie, you know, you guys were there and experienced some of those things, and it was crazy. And I had a fellow teacher come to me one time. He just walked up to me and he said, you know, there's something I noticed about you. And I said, what is that? He said, you thrive under pressure. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, when your life gets crazy, you get better. He said, you somehow get it done. He said, I don't understand how that happens to you. He said, but I watch you. And he said, I notice that when things get crowded in around you, you do your best work. He said, you do your best work under intense pressure. And I was like, that's kind of a scary trait. But I'm glad that he observed that. Okay, because that is what we want others to see in us, because we can't do that alone. Okay? We don't do that alone. And so what I want to look at as we go through this is all of these things happen to us, and it gets crazy. And when the stakes are high, when the clock is ticking, when the game is on the line, my question as we go through this lesson is, how do you respond? And over the next couple, 2-3 weeks, we're going to look at a day. We're going to look at a day in the life of Jesus. And many call this his second most stressful day of his ministry. and of course, obviously, the crucifixion and the events leading to that were the most incredible that we ever experienced. And we've spent weeks chronicling that. But I want to look at this day, because many events happen on this day. And I want to look at those events, and I want to look at how he responds. And we begin in Matthew chapter 14, and this is kind of the backstory to how this day kind of unfolds. Herod had arrested John and bound him and put him in prison because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. And now what you need to understand is we're talking about John the Baptist. Okay? John the Baptist was Jesus' cousin. And he was also the one who said, "Look, behold, the Lamb of God takes away the sin of the world." That John we've talked about a lot. And he was the one who baptized Jesus. Well, you see, John preached against sin. And John preached a powerful, passionate lesson of repentance. And so he had done, and this is verse 4. Let's look at verse 4. John had been saying to him, "It is not lawful for you to have her." Okay? Herod had taken his brother Philip's wife for his own. And John was like, "This is wrong." Okay? It is wrong for you to do this. And because of that, Herod wanted to kill John. But he was afraid of people. He was afraid of the people because one of the things that they wanted to do as leaders was to keep down problems. They wanted to keep things quiet, and because they didn't want to entice the Romans and they didn't want to get a stir started. And so he wanted to get rid of John, but he was a little afraid to get rid of John. But on Herod's birthday, the daughter of Herodias danced for the guest and pleased Herod so much that he opens his mouth and he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. Be careful when you do that. Okay? Be careful when you do that. And her mom gets involved, and she said, "This is what I want. You gave an oath in front of all of these people." And folks, this is a Bible story, okay? Moms, dads, grandmas, don't share this one at bedtime, okay? It may traumatize the kids, but this is real. This happened. "Give me here on a platter the head of John the Baptist." That's what she asked for. And he was distressed. But because of his oath and all of the dinner guests looking to see what he would do, he ordered that the request be granted. And he had John beheaded in prison. This is the same John who sat in prison after he had done what he was supposed to do, after he had preached truth, after he had called Herod out on what, and he's sitting there. This is the same John that sent those disciples to Jesus and say, "Are you the one, or we should expect somebody else? I can't really believe that I'm here." Jesus knew he was there, and he sent word back going, "Yeah, I am he. It's me." Same John. And Herod has him, and his head was brought in on a platter and given to the girl, and she carried it to her mother. This is gruesome. Okay? This is gruesome. John's disciples came and took his body and buried it. And then they went and they told Jesus. This is where the day begins. I don't know how you find out that tragic things have happened. Unfortunately, for many of us, it's here. Okay? You get a text message. I follow OC Monitor on Twitter. Okay? And so they post every obituary in the county. And many times when I'm scrolling, I see a face. And sometimes it's a face for somebody who's just in the news. And that's that shock you get. You know, when you know that face, you see that face come up and it's like, and then you begin to read to find out if they're here or not or what's happened. And then sometimes you just get that phone call, and probably the most tragic when you get really bad news is that knock on the door, okay? And so this is, you kind of put yourself in a situation, but this is what I want you to understand as you go through. What I just read to you was real, and it's pretty R-rated, okay? That's pretty rough stuff, okay? And you got to think, we have heard things of people that have happened to people, but that's far out, man. I mean, that's his friend. That's his family. And you say, well, he knew. Oh, yeah, but he was human. And he has to hear that and he has to see, these guys were John's disciples. They were the ones who loved John. They were the ones who followed John. They were the ones who were with him, who did all these things. And they're trying to process this. They're trying to get this in their head. And they have and they get word of what has happened. And so they go and take his body. And they have to go and bury it. And then they have to see what's happened to him. I mean, this is real. This is real. And so Jesus hears this and he understands and he takes in what has happened. How do you respond to bad news? How do you respond to bad news? It's one of the worst jobs in being a pastor. Worst things that I have to do is to tell others bad news. Okay? It is the hardest thing that we have to do. It's the hardest thing that we have to do is to share with somebody that they've lost a loved one, or to go to somebody and for somebody to explain to you what has happened and have to go and share with somebody what has taken place. It's hard. It's hard to just be in the room, okay? It's hard to just be in the room. And so when that happens, and when that happens to you, you tend to want to just go, okay, I need to process this, right? I mean, when you get that kind of news, the natural tendency of humans is to process. We need a little time. I need some time to kind of catch my breath. I need some time to hear this. I need some time to get this. Well, here's where we begin to unfold and unwrap this day of Jesus. In Luke chapter 9, in verses 1 through 10, we see something else that is going on at the same time. When Jesus had called the 12 together, he gave them power and authority to drive out all demons and to cure diseases. He's empowering these guys. He's teaching these guys. He sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. This is prior to. And he told them, take nothing for the journey, no staff, no bag, no bread, no money, no extra shirt. Just go. Whatever house you enter, stay there until you leave that town. And this is the assignment that he gave them. If people do not welcome you, leave their town, shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them, and just keep moving on. So they set out, and they went from village to village proclaiming the good news and healing, now get this, healing people everywhere. These guys were stoked. These guys were excited. Okay? Now, Luke enters into this storyline. Okay? Herod the Tetrarch heard about all that was going on. He was perplexed because some were saying that John had been raised from the dead and he had had him beheaded. Others said Elijah had appeared, and still others that had one of the prophets of long ago had come back to life. And so Herod said, I beheaded John. Who then is this I hear such things about? And he tried to see him. Okay? Now listen, I don't know about you, but if you had my good friend beheaded and you're trying to see me next, I don't want that dinner date. Okay? I'm concerned about that. So Jesus not only learns that his friend John, that his family has gone through this terrible incident, he also learns that Herod is looking for him too, wants to know what's going on. And he sent these guys out, and now they show back up. Okay? I mean, perfect timing, right? I mean, he just gets this, he's processing all of this, and it's like, I need to catch my breath. I need to kind of calm. And here they come back in. When the apostles returned, they reported to Jesus what they had done. He took them and he said, look, wow, that's awesome. Peter, that's great. That is so super. We just need to go somewhere and be quiet. We need to go somewhere and just unwind. We need to go somewhere and just catch our breath. Mark gives us his version. This is one of those things. This day is chronicled in all four of the Gospels. It's the only other time that is chronicled other than the crucifixion. And the apostles gathered around Jesus. They reported to him all they had done and taught. And then, because so many people were coming and going that they didn't even have a chance to eat. You ever have that day? Yeah, I know you do. I have that day. Okay, my lunch from spring break until summer are sandwiches. Okay, sometimes they're ho-hos. Okay, or whatever I can get in a package. Okay, that I can open and eat. Because if I can't carry it with me while I'm going, it doesn't happen. Because every time I sit down, somebody else comes in, and so there's always somebody there that needs a piece of you. Right? They need to talk to you. They need to see you. They need to do these things. And this was that day. Okay, because Jesus is here, and these people have come, and now the disciples have come. They've been out healing people. Okay, when you do that kind of work, when those amazing things happen, they bring people with them. There's people always around Jesus. He always attracted crowds. There's all these folks. And so everybody's swarming around. And this was his response, okay? And we're going to talk about this probably more next week, but this is all of our response. And this is a good response. Come. Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place, and let's get some rest. It's a good reaction. Okay? Not a thing wrong with that reaction. Let's go to a quiet place and let's get some rest. Jesus was ready to get away. Wouldn't you be? I mean, sometimes you just got to put down the phone. You just got to turn things off. You just have to get your head around it all. Mark chapter 6 and verse 33 shows us what happens. Great plan. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns to get there ahead of them. Let's go over here where it's quiet. And guess what happened when they got there? Okay? They could run around the lake faster than they could go across the lake. And there they were. When Jesus landed, he saw a large crowd, and he said, I am on vacation. My phone is turned off. I am off the grid, and you people need to go home and figure it out. Oh, that's not what he said, is it? It's not what he did, is it? Mark tells us that he had compassion on them because they were sheep, like sheep without a shepherd. And so he began teaching them many things. He began teaching them many things. Luke tells us this in chapter 9 and verse 11. The crowds learned about it, followed him. He welcomed them and spoke to them about the kingdom of God. And he healed those who needed healing. Let's bring those kids. Bring them in. Bring them on in here. Bring them on in here. Here's the main point for today. Either you are in a storm, coming out of a storm, or you're headed into a storm. And you may not even know it. Because you know how they are. It's like being in Florida. You know it's probably going to happen. Okay? About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, boom, it pops. So you're either in one, coming out of one, or headed into one. But today for you may be clear sailing. Okay? The big ship guys, the ocean guys, call that mirror seas. All right? Us smaller boat guys call it glass. All right? When the water is glass, it's so nice. It's so smooth. There's no chop. There's no bounce. You can just go out. And for some of you, that may be where you are in life right now. It may be glass. Okay? If it is, that's great. But understand, it can happen just like that. And you know it probably will. Now, I talked to my duck hunter friends that hunt the big water down in West Kentucky, and they're like, man, you got to be ready because you can get up in the morning, and it may be before dark, and it may be glass. And by the time you get out there, when it's time to come back, you can't see over the waves. And you got to be ready for that because storms come to all of us. It happens to all of us. This is what I want you to take away from today. This is where we take comfort. Jesus understands. He gets it. Okay? This is a day in his life. We've just gotten started. Okay? We have just gotten started into the day. And you already see the heavy news. You already see all of a sudden he's got to kind of change gears because he's gotten this bad news, but these guys come in all super excited, and now we got to kind of process it all. And so we plan a little getaway. We plan a little time to get alone. We plan a little trip, and then we get there, and all of a sudden, different plan. People need healing. People need to be ministered to. Things need to happen. And so he responds to that. He gets it. He understands. We do not serve a disconnected God. All right? He gets it. He lived it. He understands it. That is why he became fully human. Max Lucado tells a story of a young boy learning to shoot basketball. And his dad takes him out, and he hands him the ball, and he says, you shoot like this. And so the boy shoots, and he doesn't even get it up, to the goal. And so Dad takes it, and, one dribble, and boom, he shoots and hits and hands it back to his son. Like this, son, like this. And so the little boy dribbles again and shoots again and doesn't make it. And his dad rebounds and goes back, makes the shot, hits the shot, hands it back to him. And this process keeps going on and on and on. And finally, the little boy gets frustrated and looks up at his dad and says, yeah, but it's easy for you up there. And that's the way we feel about God sometimes. We're going through and we can't reach it. We can't achieve it. We can't get to it. We don't understand it. And we want to look and say, but it's easy for you. And this is what he says to us. He came and lived our life. You see, Jesus lived on this earth for 30 years before his earthly ministry began. Okay? And he worked construction. Okay? He worked construction. He worked hard jobs. And we talk about Joseph being a carpenter, but he probably more likely worked with stone. Okay? So Jesus probably was on the concrete crew. Okay? And if you know anything about construction, that's the hardest part. That's one of the toughest places to be, is on the concrete crew. When you're pushing and doing, and they didn't have trucks and hydraulics. Okay? So he understands. He knows where we are. And he feels that pain. Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 15, the writer of Hebrews gets it very clear. We do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. That's powerful. That's powerful. J.B. Phillips, the English theologian, has his own translation. This is what he says. For we have no superhuman high priest to whom our weaknesses are unintelligible. He himself has shared fully in all our experience of temptation, except that he never sinned. You see, we see sometimes pictures where politicians or business people or whoever will go into a factory and they put the hard hat on, okay? And it's like, oh yeah, they're kind of in there with the folks. Yeah, but at the end of the day, they go home and they take the hard hat off and they really don't work with those folks. Jesus worked with you. He worked in those kinds of things. He was with folks. He lived a regular life for 30 years. He understands what it is to have blisters. He understood what it was to have calluses. He understands to see people that go through the pain of everyday life. And he himself, not an angel, not an ambassador, it was him. It was him, God in the flesh. He shared fully, not partially, not nearly, not to a large degree. He became human, flesh and blood. And he shared in all of our experience, every hurt, every ache. He placed himself in our position. Listen, Jesus understood. The shortest verse in the Bible, you know what it is? Jesus wept, right? You know why he cried? Because he was experiencing grief. And he was with his friends at the tomb of his friend Lazarus. And he cried because he felt it. Listen, when you love somebody and you're with them, he knew what he was about to do, but still, it's just the experience of that grief. It's the experience of being with them and experiencing the pain and the suffering. He gets it. Listen, you guys have had friends that you've lost. Some of you have had children. Some of you had all these. You look at John the Baptist and look at how his life came to a tragic end. Jesus had to experience that as a human. He had to hear that news. He had to experience that with other people. What he had to go through. What John had to go through when those guys came into that prison cell and said, it's time. It's going to happen right now. Out of the clear blue. There was no execution date. They had a party upstairs. They had a party upstairs and they got wild and somebody said, this is what I want. And all of a sudden there it is. And Jesus understood that kind of pain. Stress. We're right in the middle of this stressful day. Right at the place where he wants to get away and get some rest, and all of a sudden the demands of people are right there in his face, thousands of them. Okay? thousands of them. We'll look at that next week. You probably heard the story of the feeding of the 5,000. Okay? Not what you plan on a day that you're on your way to vacation, but that's where he was. Why did he do this? Why did this happen this way? This is why. When the storm rises in your life, he wants you to come to him. He wants you to rely on him so that when you hurt, you will go to him, to your Father and your physician. I don't know where you are today. I don't know where you are. Some of you I do, okay? Some of you are right in the middle of a storm. And some of you are just coming out of a storm and you're recovering. And some of you may be headed into one that you know, and some of you may be headed into one that you don't know. But this is my challenge for you. If you're in the middle of the storm, come to him. If you're not relying on him, you need to lean into him, okay? You need to lean into him, and you need to lean into his people, okay? You need to lean into his people, because here's the thing. The unbelieving world, okay, if you're a believer, the unbelieving world, those who don't have Jesus, they're looking to see how you respond to tragedy, how you respond to the storms in your life. And your response to the storm in your life becomes your testimony. And so that other people will walk up to you and say, I don't know how you do that. I don't know how, when the pressure is on and things are crazy and things are going nuts, that you rise to an occasion and you get it done. I don't understand how you do that, that you can be able to say, let me tell you. Let me tell you. Let me share with you. This morning, you know where you are, and you know where you need to come, and you know what you need to do. Maybe you need to share that testimony. Maybe you need to reach out and take his hand for the first time. Let's pray.